Okay, we're going to try working on some Novaculite, but I'm not going to make uh, reproductions that were made from Novaculite. I'm going to try making a couple little Toyah points out of this stuff. Now, Toyah points are not made from Novaculite, but they do have similar rocks around here that are petrified wood or some sort of chalcedony that's very similar to Novaculite, so I think it's a good substitute. For the material, because I don't have any chalcedony or white chert or any of the other light colored cherts that a lot of these Toyahs are made from. Now I do have some West Texas chert that kind of reminds me of Keokuk when you heat treat it. I'm not sure how many Toyahs are made from that stuff, but I'm going to take a few flakes from Novaculite and make some small Toyahs. Now this is heat treated. It becomes very glass-like, for those who don't know. And I am using the flat part of this little billet to try to get some nice flakes from this little chunk. I could probably make a miniature one out of that one. These flakes are too narrow. That's a little bit better. Yeah, I can make an interesting point out of this, but that's for later. All right, let's see. A little flake point. Out of Novaculite. Let's see. Let's try this one first. Smaller one. Since I often get requests to work on small flakes, that's what I'm going to do. I keep misplacing my little pressure flakers. Now this nap's a lot different than the other stone I was working on. That darker, I think it's from the Northeast. If I'm wrong, that would be a pretty bad glitch on my part. But I think that's where it's from. Anyway, this is much different. You can actually push off long flakes on this stuff without removing too much of the edge. If you get too aggressive, that's what happens. But since we're working on a very tiny point, well, it doesn't matter too much. And yes, I'm using copper for the whole thing because so much easier. And I can talk about stuff while I'm doing this. It's not too difficult. The difficult part is figuring out what to talk about. So I have to review the video, so I gotta talk about something that I want to listen to when I'm reviewing the video. And if the volume isn't very good, let me know. My phone, I think, is getting old. It may not be recording the volume very well. It may be clogged up, the microphone. I need to take a look and see if there's a way to clean out the microphone. There's no fan in the background, so it should be pretty quiet. And you should be able to hear my voice very well because I'm right here next to the phone. But just in case, let me know. So yeah, this is 90% pressure flaking. I might do an indirect percussion strike on some portion of this, but probably not. I should be able to use passive pressure to get some nice flaking. Just push on it until it releases by itself. That's the theory anyway. Don't force it. And you should be able to get longer flakes than trying to force the flake. You see, not much of the edge is removed, even though those are some pretty good pressure flakes. And good, I mean with a lot of pressure behind them. It doesn't remove a lot of the edge like the other stone I was working just a couple of videos ago. This one here, this little Madison looking point. I need to get my other force shafts here so I can show you what it looks like on an arrow force shaft instead of a dart force shaft. Yeah, I'm not sure what the fascination is with these small points. Maybe it's just the idea that you can make hundreds of points if you make them small enough with waste flakes. But people seem to have a problem knapping the small points. I seem to have a problem losing my tools. I can't find my file to file this sharper. Let's see. Just improvise. Alrighty, let's try to drive some nice flakes without snapping the whole thing. Just let me know what your issues are with small points. Is it just the delicate nature of the point that makes it snap and you can't do anything? It just snaps in half before you get anywhere. Is that the problem, or your tool tips don't seem to be working? Or the stone just isn't cooperating? Just let me know, and I'll try to get a situation that you have on video so I can show you what I do. I can't guarantee it's always going to work. Your results may vary, but I'll just show you what I do to overcome some of these issues. The domed pad is like 90% of the issues I used to have. I used to break these on the flat pads or the notched pads, either one of those. There's some pads with no notches, you know, people use just flat pads. Never had any luck with just the flat ones. Or the notched ones. But it's old news. I'm a little bit tired today, so all my explanations are old news. Gotta be careful. This is where I snapped it last time. I can't put any pressure on the tip anywhere. I can't put any pressure. So my finger's like in the middle, holding it down, but then I got to elevate it slightly so that that flake will travel better. It's a delicate operation with these little small points. Why did they make the point so small? Well, the classic answer is because they still work. And you can make bunches of them. With just little bitty flakes. Alright, this is when it gets difficult. Starting to get thin. The platforms have to be just right so you don't apply too much pressure to get those flakes to release. If you apply too much pressure to get the flakes to release, that's when you have snaps. The platforms have to be built in such a way that it doesn't require a lot of pressure. How do you do that? Well, you kind of isolate them. You look for opportunities, but with pressure you can isolate and intentionally create platforms and dull some areas on the edge with the pressure flaker. And it'll allow you to create platforms as you're shaping and thinning. Just combine all three: flaking, creating platforms, and thinning, and using the pressure flaker in various ways, so that the overall goal is to make each flake easy to remove. You know, even though you are shaping and contouring, just make it so that each flake is easy to remove without too much effort. You are going to lose part of the edge to the platform preparation, so it may take a few dozen points before you get the hang of it. Like anything else, were Toyah points really thin? No, not really. I mean, they were sometimes, especially if they're made on a thin flake. I've seen those. Those are risky. You really have to sit down and get used to the really thin flakes, because they're already as thin as the point should be. But it looks weird if you just trim around the edges, so you gotta send some flakes inward. Right? So it looks a little bit bifacial instead of unifacial or whatever. Gotta have some nice little flakes, just so it looks cool. Were they always made that way? No, they're not always perfectly flaked. Some are pretty random. So a lot of this side on this side is going to be left intact. I mean, how should I say this? The original flake scar will be remaining on this side for the most part. Now, I need to get it thinner than that, right? But with Novaculite, I don't know. I'm going to notch it, right? So the notching should make it thinner. I just had to be extremely careful with the notching. So what am I doing here? I'm just strengthening the edge for some more thinning. But just minimal thinning. It's already pretty close to where I need it to be. For the notching. The thinner the point, the easier it is to notch. But with Novaculite, don't have to worry too much about that. Just as long as it's thin enough. And, just got to get used to it. Used to what is thin enough, just barely thin enough to be able to notch effectively without it being too thin. Because if it's too thin, it's really difficult to prevent breakage. All right, I'm gonna go take off the glove. The glove's getting in the way. But yeah, I try to pop out big flakes in the bottom of the notch to thin it down a little bit. They're going to be pretty wide, these notches. The Toyah points, or the makers of the Toyah points, were not shy about really making these notches large. In some other areas of the country, like on the West Coast, some of these notches were very narrow on similar points to the Toyah point. I'm not going to make one of those today, I don't think, but it's on the list. More, narrow notched points. I don't want to get too bold with those big pop outs because there is a limit to how narrow that neck can be without snapping. When I'm doing this on the base, you can snap it right off at the neck. And I'm pushing in the middle here, just above, or just where it's contacting the pad. And I'm pushing inward mainly to drive a flake in, thin it out, preliminary thinning. Again, mainly inward, so I'm not pushing downward too much. If I push downward too much, it's going to snap that neck. I can always make the neck more narrow in a little bit. I don't have to do it right away. All right, push inward mainly. Very risky. But it worked out. So now I'm going to deepen these notches a little bit more. I don't know why they would do it this way, but a lot of these Toyahs are extremely delicate with extremely short distances between notches. I'm not going to risk too much of it for the video. Yeah, I just blew off part of that side of that notch there. I got to be careful about that too. Okay, so now I just work on the sides, maybe some serrations. Let's see. I have a hafted arrowhead over here. If I can get it to untangle itself. You can see the size difference. But it'll haft onto that. Just taper the end of the foreshaft, and it can be mounted on an arrow. Yeah, I think these were used for all kinds of stuff, hunting or whatever. But the main advantage of something small like this is it'll break when it hits, and that's an advantage in warfare more than in hunting. In warfare, because if it breaks on impact, you can't shoot it back as effectively as an intact point, as a point that remains intact. Yeah, you don't want the enemy to shoot the arrows back. It seems to be a common problem back in the day. Enemy shooting back arrows. Makes you wonder how closely matched the arrows were to the bows. If you can shoot back someone else's arrows that are matched to their bow, either the bows are very standardized or it didn't matter too much. Yeah, and steel is kind of slippery, but I'm still going to use it. Better to slip a little bit than to grab too much and tear off the barb. Or, make a mistake because you get too much downward pressure. It'll snap something in half. Snap it off. Yeah, I guess just little serrations on this one. Some of the Toyahs had big serrations. Start off with big ones, and then toward the tip they get more closely spaced and tinier. Goofed up there. I blew out that serration that was in the middle there. Okay, this is when I put a lot of pressure on it, so I have to make sure that the ear is well seated. I don't know. It's a little bit thick in that area. So it's not popping out very well. Mainly inward pressure, because downward will snap it right there. So you try mainly inward pressure. All right, and so on some of these tips, I think they were slightly beveled. That's what I hear anyway. I haven't really examined many Toyahs close up. Just from photographs. I do have some Toyahs in my collection, like maybe 3, that I remember off the top of my head. I don't think they had beveled tips, but Could be wrong. I never really paid attention to that part. So I'm just going to push down in one direction on both sides. It's probably a safer way to do the tips anyway. Alright, so that's it. Little Toyah made of Novaculite. Looks very similar to the petrified wood that we have out here sometimes. Or the chalcedony. I'll probably do one more of these. Alright. Okay, so off camera I knocked out another one quickly. And I made it a little thicker. You can go quicker if you make them thicker. So yeah. The serrations are a little bit bigger on this one too. I kind of stalled the basal notch. Very sharp tip. So yeah, I just knocked it out quickly so I can add two to one of the auction points. So it'll be a 3-point set. You know, that little Toyah that I signed in the video, that's going to be part of this three-piece set. I'm not going to assign these two. They're just too small. Let's see. Well, it'd be better if I just see about 8 millimeters here, maybe 7. The widest part, about 12. Two millimeter, maybe 3. Okay. So yeah, you'll see these in the pictures, or the single picture in the auction, along with the other one. Alrighty.